What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Thomas, bringing you another edition of the Thomas Take. In case you haven't heard, my last episode debuted on the Buffalo Sports Network, BSN Radio 716, and it was a great debut. Talked UFC 210, talked the Buffalo Bills, and then to cap it all off, I talked about Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, and I want to just reach out to everybody and say, to start off the show today, thank you for tuning into the show, thank you for downloading, thank you for sharing, thank you for tweeting, retweeting. I really appreciate the support and the interaction that I get with you, the Thomas Take Troopers, as I like to call you guys, and you, the Buffalo Bills fans. So here we are back again, another episode of the Thomas Take. This one will be broadcasted on YouTube. This one will be also on Spreaker, which is the device that I'll be using today to record the show. And if you want to check this one out, this one will not be on BSN Radio. That is a Buffalo Sports Talk episode. Network. It's a Buffalo Sports Network, obviously. So that being the case, this will be on YouTube. So subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not checked out previous episodes not pertaining to Buffalo Sports Talk, which there's quite a few. Mostly when I'm not talking Buffalo Sports Talk, I'm talking MMA or other headlines in sports. So check that out. It is at Thomas Take Sports Podcast on YouTube. That is the podcast channel. And subscribe, and you will have access to every Thomas Take that there has ever been. So with that, today is Friday, March 31st. Bellator is Bellator 175 on the docket tonight on Spike TV as Quentin Rampage Jackson will take on King Mo Lawal for the second time, a rematch, a fight that has two guys in which both fighters are brash, trash talkers, two big names in the MMA light heavyweight division, but this fight will be at heavyweight, and a main storyline heading into this fight is the fact that, yes, it is a heavyweight fight, but more so, Quentin Rampage Jackson weighs 257 pounds, weighed in at that weight, while King Mo Lawal weighed in around 220. So very interesting stuff. Actually, it might have been around 230. I didn't check that yet. I'm just assuming there. But I wanted to pay my respects to Quentin Jackson because although he is at a point in his career where he's obviously on the tail end, not many people realize what he has done for the sport of mixed martial arts. And I wanted to kind of profile that, chronicle his career, and take a step back before I give my prediction for the fight tonight. So last night I watched UFC 67. UFC 67 was a card in which Anderson Silva defended his quote-unquote title versus Travis Lutter, but Travis Lutter ended up missing weight for that fight, and the belt was not on the line. So Anderson Silva defended his, championship mystique versus Travis Lutter, and Mirko Cro Cop made his UFC debut against Eddie Sanchez. And another guy that made his debut on that card was Quentin Rampage Jackson. He won his fight versus Marvin the Beast Eastman, and that was a long time ago. I think it was around 2007. So before that, Quentin Jackson had a long career in Pride, a guy that really cemented his legacy already in Pride before going over to the UFC. And he's a guy that, I wrote an article on my Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook page, and I talked about Quentin Jackson. And I want to read what I wrote, and it was well received, and it is pretty much, obviously how I feel about Quentin Jackson. So let me just find that here. He's a guy that added a lot of charisma to the sport of MMA. A guy that I feel really has not gotten the credit that he deserves. And here's my take on Rampage Jackson. Before Rampage Jackson puts on a pair of MMA gloves in what could be his last bout, I think it is only fair to acknowledge the former Pride middleweight, 205 pounds in Pride, and a UFC light heavyweight champion for the marketing pioneer that he has been throughout his entire 20-year fighting career. This is the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Fighter Profile, Quinton Rampage Jackson. Few men have stepped inside the cage and have generated the amount of attention to the sport of mixed martial arts like Quinton Rampage Jackson. A career that dates back nearly 20 years to the days of Pride Fighting Championships, a Japan-based organization which allowed and promoted rules of brutality. Hardcore MMA fans know that among the international stars today, Rampage stands alone as a fighter that brought real worldwide attention to the sport of mixed martial arts. Fighters that have come afterwards that have done the same should name drop him as one of the fighters that started it all. When the UFC merged with Pride FC back in 2007, Rampage was one of the few fighters that the UFC was willing to push in a new era of the UFC. After Jackson destroyed Marvin Eastman at UFC 67, Jackson was given a title shot and was matched up with the biggest draw in the company at the time, Chuck Liddell. Jackson didn't just win the title, he iced the Iceman, knocking out the Iceman nearly in 2 minutes into the fight. This allowed the UFC to promote Rampage as they saw fit, putting him in a huge fight at the time versus Dan Henderson in a fight that Rampage won, which I think to this day is the best win of his career. He was a brash, trash-talking champion on The Ultimate Fighter, coaching against the then number one contender and UFC favorite Forrest Griffin. Rampage lost his belt in that bout via decision and never got his UFC belt back, but the mark Rampage has left on the sport cannot be denied. One of the few fighters that appeared on some of the biggest shows in the mid to late 2000s. He was featured once again coaching on The Ultimate Fighter versus his bitter rival Rashad Evans on Season 10 of The Ultimate Fighter Heavyweights, which to me is one of the best seasons of all time just because of the attention they brought to the sport at that time. Add in the fact that a guy named Kimbo Slice was also featured on the season. It was pure television gold. The verbal battle between both men set the stage for what is considered to be one of the best grudge match hyped fights in UFC history. These things matter. I think it's necessary to always mention the guys that brought the sport to the worldwide phenomenon that it is today, and Rampage definitely falls into this category. A two-organization champion and an MMA fighter that has taken on all comers, owning wins over names like Dan Henderson, Vanderlei Silva, Chuck Liddell, Shogun Rua, Lyoto Machida, Keith Jardine, and many more. Much like many fighters before and after him, Rampage has had his fair share of battles with the UFC, leaving the UFC for Bellator only to return to the UFC and to once again leave for Bellator. I've always thought that Rampage has had as underrated a career as any and should most definitely be mentioned as among the greatest light heavyweights of all time in MMA. One of the most important draws that the sport has ever seen as well. He was a great prop for two of the biggest organizations that the sport of MMA has ever seen in Pride and, of course, the UFC. The stage is set for Rampage's next bout, a rematch versus King Mo Lawal. The first fight was a win for Rampage, and the stage is set for a compelling fight between two brash fighters with two completely different styles. With Rampage the brawler and Lawal the wrestler, it should be a great fight and a fight that could be the final bout of Quinton Rampage Jackson's career. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that take on Quinton Rampage Jackson, and I want to add on to that. I don't know if this will be Quinton Rampage Jackson's last MMA fight. I do know it could quite possibly be the last fight for Rampage inside the Bellator cage, as he is actually signed on with both Bellator and the UFC, but this is his last fight in the Bellator organization on his contract. So he could be heading back to the UFC, or he could be retiring. Rampage gave a unfiltered, unscripted interview on SportsCenter, giving his clear, 100% honest take as to what is his biggest regret in the sport of MMA. And he said even competing in the sport of MMA was a huge regret because he has missed out on time with his family. Rampage has essentially done it all, so there's really no need for him to continue if he gets past Mo Lawal. If he doesn't get past Mo Lawal, that doesn't change the fact that Rampage has accomplished quite a bit in the sport. When you put him up on the pedestal of one of the better trash talkers in the game of MMA, on a pedestal with guys like Conor McGregor and Chael Sonnen, he definitely belongs. He definitely brought a charismatic quality to the sport of mixed martial arts on a reality TV stage. His personality is as easy to root for as anybody in the UFC or in Bellator or in the sport of MMA in general. So, I want to let it be known that, hey, to the casual fans, Quentin Rampage Jackson is a guy that you could credit for bringing the sport to where it is today. 2007, when he made his debut against Marvin Eastman, that was a huge story at that time. And that was when Zuffa really started to explode with guys like Quentin Rampage Jackson, with guys like Chuck Liddell, with guys like Randy Couture. That was when the UFC really started to reach its pinnacle into what it is today. So my prediction for the fight, obviously, Bellator 175, you got Rampage versus King Mo. The fact that Rampage weighs in at 257 makes this a very interesting fight. That is the story heading into this fight. Quentin Rampage Jackson's weight. Will it be too much? Will it slow him down? There definitely can be a case made for that. Since Rampage beat King Mo, Rampage has fought only 2 times. King Mo has fought 8 times. So that says a lot. King Mo has been very active, where Rampage has not. I think it could be a win for King Mo, but I am rooting for Rampage Jackson. So I'm going to go kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door. I'm going to pick King Mo, but I'm rooting for Rampage. I want to see Rampage get the knockout victory. I want to see him walk out of the Bellator cage in style, much like Tito Ortiz did. So that was the Thomas take on Rampage Jackson. Rampage Jackson's fighter profile, and I'll be doing a lot more of these segments as time goes on, as I got a lot of stuff coming up with the Buffalo Bills. Tune in to my next episode of the Thomas Take on BSN Radio 716. That will air Monday and Wednesday. The replay will be on Wednesday. The new edition will be on Monday. So the newest edition's on Monday. That Monday episode will re-air on Wednesday as well. Tune into that. Download the BSN Radio app. It is on the App Store and the Play Store. You can tune in to my show and plenty others among the Buffalo Bills fan base. We're a bunch of guys that love covering the team, love giving our clear-cut, honest opinions, and I've really enjoyed being a part of the team so far. So thank you to everyone that listens to this show. Thank you for all the support, all the positive messages back and forth that I've exchanged with people that I would have never known had it not been for this podcast. I really appreciate the love and support from everybody all around the area, all around the Bills backers fan base. And I got a great show in store for you guys on Monday. Tune in, and if you miss it on Monday, you can always catch it on Wednesday. So that is it for today's show, and thank you for joining me.